Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program. Let's begin with the headlines. The Zionist occupation intensifies its ceasefire violations with a deadly airstrike on a humanitarian relief team in Beit Lahia. Hamas denounces the attack and urges mediators to intervene. The Gas Exporting Countries Forum renews its support for the Trans-Sahara gas pipeline, a strategic venture set to bolster Algeria's energy exports to Europe. Also coming up, mountain outrage in Morocco as the regime stands accused of exploiting the underprivileged during Ramadan. Anti-normalization movements warn this erosion of dignity is further undermining the monarchy's moral authority. And later on, European military commanders will convene in London next week under the coalition of the Willing Initiative to explore enforcement mechanisms for a Ukraine ceasefire. Welcome back to the details. We begin our news in Gaza. In yet another strike, 9 Palestinians were killed and several others critically wounded after the Zionist occupation bombed a charitable organization in Beit Lahia. The Palestinian Ministry of Health confirmed the casualties, most of whom were aid workers, including 4 journalists. The attack targeted a vehicle belonging to an international charity delivering relief to shelters during Ramadan.
In a densely populated area, which includes an entire camp and a vital commercial hub, a civilian car carrying 5 innocent and defenseless people was targeted by Israeli occupation forces. This attack occurred without any justification, warning or provocation. These individuals were simply civilians, with no involvement in any conflict, yet they were struck without cause.
And in the wake of this deadly attack, Hamas has condemned what it called a flagrant breach of the ceasefire, accusing the Zionist occupation of deliberately targeting relief workers to deepen Gaza's humanitarian catastrophe. In a statement Saturday, the group said over 150 Palestinians have been killed since the truce took effect, urging mediators to step in before the crisis spirals beyond control.
This criminal escalation, accompanied by deliberate killings and barbaric bombardment across various areas of the Strip, once again confirms the occupation's intention to overturn the ceasefire agreement and its deliberate sabotage of any opportunity to complete the implementation of the agreement and the prisoners' exchange, in blatant defiance of the mediators and the international community. The escalating crimes of the occupation, which have claimed the lives of more than 150 martyrs since the ceasefire took effect, place the guarantor mediators, the United Nations, and all relevant parties before their political and legal responsibilities to stop these heinous crimes, prevent the occupation from continuing its aggression against our people, and hold its Nazi perpetrators accountable.
Meanwhile, the horrors on the ground continue to mount. 4 children were killed on Friday after the Zionist occupation shelled a group of Palestinians near Subh al-Harazin school in Gaza City's Zaytun neighborhood. According to the Palestinian news agency, the victims were rushed to Ma'madani Hospital, but for these young lives, it was already too late. Adding to the staggering toll, the Palestinian Ministry of Health announced that over the past 48 hours, 19 martyrs and 26 wounded were brought to hospitals, 7 newly slain, while 12 bodies were pulled from the ruins. The death toll now stands at a staggering 48,543, with over 111,000 injured. Yet beneath the rubble, an estimated 12,000 souls remain entombed. Meanwhile, civil defense teams recovered 13 additional bodies, including 3 unidentified victims unearthed within the grounds of a Shifa medical complex. And with humanitarian aid facing mounting obstacles, the government media office warned that the continued closure of 8 crossings is paving the road to famine. With food, fuel, and water supplies dangerously depleted, officials stress that there are no alternatives left to avert a humanitarian abyss.
We are on the brink of famine if the siege on Gaza Strip continues. There is no alternative but to end the siege and ensure the smooth flow of aid. Halting the transfer of waste and rubble threatens the spread of chronic diseases, and there are still about 12,000 bodies of martyrs under the rubble.
Now to the occupied West Bank, where tensions remain high. In Nablus, a young Palestinian was killed and another injured as Zionist forces stormed the city, sparking fierce clashes. Live fire, tear gas, and the arrest of a child marked yet another night of turmoil. Meanwhile, Tulkarm and its twin camps remain under siege for over 6 weeks, besieged by raids, displacements, and military buildup. And in a worrying escalation, settler violence is also on the rise. On Saturday, in the occupied West Bank, Houthi Zionist assailants stormed Khirbat al-Marjim, terrorizing residents and setting homes and vehicles ablaze. Meanwhile, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warns of a sharp rise in settler attacks across the region. Sofia Kanturi has more.
Under the clock of night, terror struck Palestinians again. In a chilling CCTV footage, Houthi Zionist settlers are seen breaking into a Palestinian property, ransacking every corner before realizing they are being watched, smashing the surveillance camera in a last act of destruction. This latest attack unfolded in the Palestinian village of Khirbat al-Marjim in the West Bank, where 3 homes and several cars were torched. Another brutal chapter in an all too familiar story.
Yesterday at 11:30 p.m. they came, smashing everything in sight. I locked the house and ran around. They even tried to kidnap the children. For over an hour we fought to protect them. They abandoned them only after we chased them. They've come before, stealing chickens and sheep, but this time was vicious, far more violent.
The attackers fired live rounds, hurled tear gas, and left behind a trail of fire and fear. In the dead of night, the village turned into a battlefield, and the flames lit up the sky.
This time, their wickedness was written all over their faces. They climbed the roof, hurled stones and smashed doors and windows, and set the house ablaze. We rushed in to save the children, but they were gone. These settlers had taken them and only left them behind when we gave chase.
This is my mother's bed, but they weren't just burning furniture. They were burning memories, dignity, and peace. This wasn't just an assault on a house. It was an assault on our very humanity.
These aren't isolated incidents. This is a systematic campaign of terror, repeated across countless villages in the West Bank. Homes looted, lives shattered, and entire communities living under siege. And now, with Zionist ministers openly advocating for the full annexation of the West Bank, the fear that hangs in the air is no longer whispered. It is shouted from the rooftops set on fire.
Beyond Palestine, solidarity movements are gaining momentum abroad. In a resounding call for justice, thousands took to the streets of London and Dublin on Saturday, demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and an end to arms shipments to the Zionist occupation. In Dublin, demonstrators also urged the cancellation of the Irish Prime Minister's upcoming visit to the White House, decrying silence in the face of suffering.
where to start? I'm just ashamed of Micheál Martin. I can't believe he went over there and kowtowed to that dictator, Trump. And I'm as embarrassed about what he does when he's at home kowtowing to Ursula von der Leyen, trying to get us all into this big European war, trying to dismantle the triple lock without being honest to Irish people about what they're up to. I don't know what he has to gain from it, but you know, it's got to do with money and power and wealth and greed. And Irish people don't want to go to war. We're really proud of our peacekeepers, but we don't want to go to war. Keep our triple lock.
Meanwhile, in southern Lebanon, 2 civilians were killed in a Zionist drone strike targeting their car in the town of Burj al-Muluk, according to civil defense authorities. Meanwhile, enemy warplanes prowled the skies above the western Bekaa Valley. To energy news now, where Algeria is taking center stage. The gas exporting countries forum has praised the Trans-Sahara gas pipeline linking Niger and Algeria as a strategic artery for delivering energy to Europe. In its latest report, the forum hailed Algeria's rise in stature as a global gas hub, bolstered by new Sonatrach discoveries and landmark partnerships with giants such as Eni, ExxonMobil, and TotalEnergies. With robust investments and a favorable regulatory landscape, Algeria is poised to remain a cornerstone of global gas supply well into 2050.
Algeria's upstream sector is drawing the attention of major energy industry players as the country holds vast natural gas reserves and has a favorable regulatory framework. This strengthens Algeria's ability to expand its natural gas sector beyond 2030, with the potential to maintain or even boost production levels until 2050.
And further cementing its strategic role, Algeria's energy credentials continue to shine. The Gas Exporting Countries Forum has reaffirmed Algeria's role as a linchpin in Europe's energy security, citing its robust infrastructure and consistent supply performance. According to its latest report, Algeria exports nearly 52 billion cubic meters of gas annually, 65% through pipelines and 35% as a liquefied natural gas, reinforcing its status as a reliable energy partner. On a different note, a celebration of innovation and tech talent in Algeria. Huawei Algeria held the closing ceremony of its Seeds for the Future 2024 program at the Sheraton Hotel, honoring 50 outstanding students trained in AI, cybersecurity, cloud computing, big data, and renewable energy. The initiative, conducted in partnership with the Ministry of Higher Education, aims to nurture Algerian ICT talent.
The development of the ecosystem requires more of such exchanges and more frameworks in this field, in which there should be longer programs through networking with investors, networking with large technology institutions, helping to launch emerging and small institutions, as well as opening the doors to enter global markets.
This year, the Chinese side will continue to cooperate with the Algerian side in the fields of technology, information and digitalization through thematic forums, reciprocal sending of relocations and talent training.
Your participation highlights the strong partnership and the shared commitment between Huawei and Nigeria for fostering technical advancement, skill development, and the youth empowerment.
And highlighting youth excellence, the program offered a unique opportunity for discovery and global exposure. As part of Huawei's Seeds for the Future 2024 program, 20 out of 50 students were selected through an ICT skills test for a discovery trip to China, exploring innovations in Shenzhen and Beijing. A highlight was the Tech for Good Algeria competition, where students pitched 5 projects to a jury from the Ministry of Startups. B-Shield won top prize. The team will receive support and take part in a major ICT event in China.
celebrating the closing ceremony of Seeds for the Future 2025, but we are also celebrating the first version of Tech for Good Algerian version. And we are the winners of this first version with our project, our innovative project Beehive, that is designed for beehive monitoring and remotely.
Turning now to Western Sahara, where a legal delegation was met with hostility. In a stark affront to the international legal oversight, Moroccan occupation authorities have deported a delegation from the International Association of Lawyers for Western Sahara upon arrival at the Laayoune airport. The lawyers had intended to assess human rights conditions, examine resource exploitation, and meet with the families of Sahrawi political prisoners and civil society representatives.
¿Nos puede decir el motivo por el que no podemos bajar del avión, por favor? Repetimos por tercera vez. ¿Cuál es el motivo?
Meanwhile, on the domestic front in Morocco, discontent is simmering. Amid deepening poverty and suffering or surging prices, discontent is brewing in Morocco, where many accuse the Makhzen regime of turning Ramadan food aid into a political bargaining chip. Critics contend the aid is less about relief and more about reinforcing loyalty, weaponizing charity while the economic crisis continues to bite.
The use of public resources belonging to municipalities, such as trucks and other means, for distribution is entirely illegal, and we must put a stop to it. Not for them to tell us that this is a charitable act by an association. The association is well known, its name is Jude, and the party collaborate with its also known, which is the RNI, and therefore this is another matter that drags us into corruption.
And the criticism doesn't stop there. In a sharp political rebuke, the Federation of the Moroccan Democratic Left has accused figures linked to the Prime Minister Aziz Akhnouch's party of exploiting poverty for electoral advantage. A party representative questioned the Interior Minister over misuse of state resources by groups masquerading as charities, seeking to sway voters ahead of upcoming elections and the race to lead the so-called World Cup government. Meanwhile, anti-normalization voices in Morocco are growing louder. Anti-normalization voices are growing louder in Morocco as activists denounce the Makhzen regime's defending silence on Zionist atrocities in occupied Palestine. At a solemn night vigil in Rabat, Aziz Hannawi, Secretary General for the Moroccan Observatory Against Normalization, warned that courting the occupier breeds only contempt and national disgrace.
Have we truly been liberated from normalization, or are we still mired in humiliation and degradation due to official decisions that continue to oppose both the people and their will? Even through these very decisions, to the official stance we say no matter how much you oppose and confront the people's will, no matter how much you refuse to listen to them, no matter how much you align yourself with the Zionists, know this well, the Zionist regime will ultimately reject you. At Al-Aqsa, when it enacts its plans to control the mosque, Judaize Al-Quds and expel its rightful residents, you will be cast aside. At Al-Aqsa, when it enacts its plans to control the mosque, Judaize Al-Quds and expel its rightful residents, you will be cast aside.
Shifting focus now to Europe, where key diplomatic talks are on the horizon. European leaders are set to convene in London next Thursday for a high-level military talks aimed at securing a ceasefire in Ukraine as fragile peace efforts between Moscow and Kiev persist. Yasin Erukti reports now.
Efforts to broker a ceasefire in Ukraine are gaining momentum as European nations prepare for a high-level military summit in London next Thursday. The gathering, expected to unite military chiefs from 30 countries, is being hailed as a pivotal step toward a durable truce between Kiev and Moscow. The initiative, announced by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, comes amid heightened diplomatic efforts and renewed calls from Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky for a stronger international backing.
Our militaries will meet on Thursday this week here in the United Kingdom to put strong and robust plans in place to swing in behind a peace deal and guarantee Ukraine's future security. President Trump has offered Putin the way forward to a lasting peace. Now we must make this a reality. So this is the moment to keep driving towards the outcome that we want to see, to end the killing, a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, and lasting security for all of us.
Kiev is pushing for more than just diplomatic assurances. President Zelensky has called for the deployment of foreign peacekeeping forces on Ukrainian soil, a move meant to consolidate any future ceasefire and deter further aggression. But tensions are far from easing on the battlefield. Russia continues its advances in Kursk and other key zones, even as talks progress behind closed doors. Zelensky accused the Kremlin of deliberately stalling truce negotiations, dragging its feet to bolster its military foothold.
Our position is that we will not recognize Ukrainian occupied territories as Russian. In any case, the Ukrainian side has a presence in the Kursk region. The encirclement of the Ukrainian military is a Putin lie. There is no encirclement of the Ukrainian military in the Kursk region. What kind of signals are these coming from the Russian side? I think that the Russian side wants to surround the Ukrainian military in the same direction, but on the territory of Ukraine.
In a virtual summit of 26 countries, Western allies echoed Kiev's concerns. Starmer reaffirmed the importance of sustained pressure on Russia through sanctions and diplomatic isolation as leverage for meaningful dialogue. Italy, however, ruled out sending combat troops.
The Prime Minister reiterated that national involvement in a potential ground military force is out of the question. However, she emphasized that Italy plans to continue working with its European and Western partners, as well as with the United States, to establish reliable and effective security guarantees for Kiev.
Across the Atlantic, the United States is signaling cautious optimism following back-channel talks between U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Secretary of State Marco Rubio voiced hope that the warring sides are inching closer to a breakthrough.
Suffice it to say, I think there is reason to be cautiously optimistic, but by the same token, we continue to recognize this is a difficult and complex situation. Obviously, we're going to wait for Ambassador Witkoff to return. He's not back yet. We're going to reconvene. Obviously, I spoke to him late last night. He spoke to the president well before that. He may have spoken to other members of our team. I've been here. But ultimately, we're going to reconvene, and the president will have options available to him, and decisions will be made after that.
As diplomatic channels intensify and military leaders prepare to convene in London, the prospects of a ceasefire, once elusive, appears increasingly tangible. Yet, with tensions still simmering on the battlefield, the road to peace remains precarious. The coming days may well determine whether this momentum leads to meaningful resolution or merely another pause in a protracted conflict.
And in a separate diplomatic ref, tensions flare between Washington and Pretoria. A diplomatic row has erupted after U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio declared South African Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool persona non grata, accusing him of inciting racial discord and showing hostility toward Washington and President Donald Trump. Announcing the expulsion in a post on X platform, Rubio's move drew swift rebuke from Pretoria, with the South African presidency calling the decision regrettable and urging a return to diplomatic decorum, while reaffirming its commitment to constructive U.S. ties.
Slavery. Out of this exile grew this Muslim community.
Also out of Washington, a controversial immigration proposal is making headlines. A leaked draft has unveiled sweeping plans by the Trump administration to impose travel bans on citizens from some 43 countries. According to Reuters, the proposal categorizes nations into tiers, placing 11 on a red list, barring entry outright. Among them, Afghanistan, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria, and Venezuela, signaling a hardline shift in U.S. immigration policy. Canada's newly sworn-in Prime Minister Mark Carney has issued a resolute rebuke to President Donald Trump's provocative annexation threat, declaring that Canada shall never be absorbed into the United States. Calling the Trump administration the gravest challenge in decades, Carney underscored a shifting geopolitical posture. In a bid to fortify foreign alliances, he announced forthcoming diplomatic visits to Paris and London amid rising tensions with Washington.
Personally, I've been clear. The ministers behind me, I think to an individual, when asked, have been clear that we will never, ever, in any way, shape or form, be part of the United States.
And now let's turn to other international headlines making waves across the globe. Here's Salman Asseb with the news in brief.
The Russian Ministry of Defense announced the capture of two new towns, Zawolishinka and Rubenshina, in the Kursk region. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Air Force reported shooting down 130 Russian drones that targeted several areas from Friday night to Saturday. As the African Union President and peace mediator for the DRC, Angola called for an immediate ceasefire. Meanwhile, President João Manuel urged all parties to cease hostilities by midnight and avoid capturing new strategic areas. The Sudanese army announced its progress in El Fasher, North Darfur, and the recapture of a Tarus located between White Nile and Sennar states. In an early Saturday statement, the army confirmed advancing in a Tarus border area with South Sudan, previously used by the Rapid Support Forces to launch attacks on the army in Sennar and White Nile. Tunisia declared a state of alert after desert locusts were spotted in Tatooine. The Ministry of Agriculture confirmed that control measures are in place with regional committees on standby. While locusts are spreading across the region, the ministry assured that they pose no immediate threat to local vegetation.
Finally, on a more uplifting note, in a gesture of compassion, a Jordanian charity is extending a lifeline to Gaza by delivering iftar meals. A quiet act of mercy, echoing louder than words. Sarah Virginia reports now.
In this sacred month of Ramadan, a powerful bond of fraternal solidarity is being quietly yet resolutely woven between two peoples, from Jordan to Gaza, bound not just by faith but by compassion. At the heart of this humanitarian gesture stands Tikiyat Ali, a Jordanian charitable organization that remains steadfast in its mission. Since the onset of the Zionist onslaught on Gaza, its volunteers have moved heaven and earth to ease the suffering of a population caught in the crossfire of despair.
We've
been working with Gaza since the beginning of the war and the brutal aggression. We have distributed around 70,000 food purses and 40,000 jackets. However, Ramadan has also its own specificities. In parallel, we are organizing charity tables in Amman. We've also set up Mawaid al-Rahman in Jabaliyah and Shuja'iyah, providing approximately 1,000 to 2,000 iftar meals per day, particularly in northern Gaza.
To make iftar possible in this warm communal spirit, trucks trudge along winding uncertain roads. But one thing is sure, Jordan's solidarity never skips a beat. Even as border crossings slam shut and restrictions tighten like a noose, Tikiyat Ali presses on, unwavering in its commitment to reach those in need.
Gaza is under siege. The border crossings have been closed for about a week. We have prepared around 15 trucks, which we sent to Taqiyat Ali to prepare for the month of Ramadan. With these supplies, we are preparing meals for the people of Gaza. For anything unavailable, we rely on Gaza's local market to address shortages.
In Gaza, these familiar melodies stir bittersweet memories of iftar once shared in peace, laughter echoing in family courtyards. But this year, the feast is shadowed by famine and joy has given way to grief. Yet even so, solidarity finds a way, a flicker of light in the darkest of times.
We want to send a message to the whole world. Charity work must be done everywhere, whether in Gaza or elsewhere. Wherever there are people in need, someone must be there. We must help them.
In the face of adversity, Ramadan becomes more than ritual. It becomes resistance through compassion, and every shared meal a symbol of hope. A proverb reminds us where there is will, there is a way. And here, that will is fierce, feeding not just the body, but also the spirit.
That's the end of our news program for tonight. Thanks for watching. Good night.